Hello everyone, thanks for being here, joining this session. I'm Xaler from Ethereum, auditor and security researcher. And today we're gonna go through a little summary of which are the latest vulnerabilities that are more relevant for the space in 2023, but also from last year. This is not a comprehensive list at all of all the vulnerabilities out there, obviously, and I've tried to put them into three categories, which I think are the most impactful nowadays. The agenda is among these three categories. We're going to go first on reentrancy, which is the oldest vulnerability on Ethereum, but still the most impactful one. We'll see why is that. We will give you some definitions, a little bit of history, and then also talking about how to protect. And we are understanding that there are issues given by wrong assumptions when developing contracts into other chains which are not Ethereum. So we are going to try to explore those and raise a little bit of awareness into it. And then, because of it, Barcelona is focused on art, creativity, and community, we're going to see also some NFT attack vectors, and we're going to focus more on the smart contract side, and we will talk a little bit of example around there. So, starting with reentrancy. Reentrancy is not a blockchain thing, it's a computer science definition, first of all. Its definition depends whether you're on a single processor system or multi-processor system. Let's say that if you have a single processor, a procedure can be called reentrant whenever its execution can be interrupted, and the execution can then jump on another execution of the same, actually re-entering from the beginning the procedure itself. On a multi-processor system, we talk more about programs or subroutines, and reentrancy takes the definition more of a concurrency of the same instance being executed several times. No matter what, the important thing on reentrancy is that if several executions of the same run, re-entering or concurrently, there's a problem when dealing with data, because if those share the same set of data and read and write from the same set of data, it's important to have a consistent state. What it means is that all the executions should read the same data in the same way. Usually in computer science, you have several strategies to avoid having inconsistent data and state. Two of the most important ones are using mutexes that completely prohibits the reentrancy on the same execution of the same instance, or fast synchronization data strategies that helps to have a consistent state among all the executions. But what it means for blockchain is blockchain is especially the EVM is a single processor system. You have this stack machine that goes on. So in blockchain, the definition of reentrancy is more like a procedure one. And the main example, obviously, in reentrancy is the canonical example is you have a contract, you have a function. This function does a call somewhere else. The call can go within the same contract, we talk about internal calls, or somewhere else external into another contract. Those are external calls. So the canonical example with reentrancy is about external calls, because a contract calls another one, and if that contract is malicious, then it can reenter within the same function, and we will call about single function reentrancy. It can reenter into another function, and we will have cross-function reentrancy. And you can find all definitions. You can have cross-contract reentrancies, you can have read-only reentrancies, and even one which is theorized but still not seen in the space, which is a cross-chain reentrancy. It might be possible even if we didn't see it yet. Moving forward. As I said at the beginning, reentrancy is old. The very first example recorded on Ethereum blockchain is June 10, 2016, even before the famous DAO act that brought to the fork of the chain. It was called a recursive code issue. You can check the transaction in there, but basically the code was this one. And the problem was exactly there. This is, again, the canonical example of reentrancy. You have a user balance that you store in a local variable, and then you do an external call to the message sender sending that amount of it. Now, if the message sender is malicious, it can re-enter within the same function and draw all your it before setting the balance to 0. What's the problem here? The problem is that the external call is performed while there is an inconsistent state. The inconsistent state is that the user balance is still not set to 0. And leveraging that, you can actually drain all the it contract in the contract. Moving forward, the latest example, for example, is from last year, from last month, sorry. The Keeper protocol has been exploited through a reentrancy. This is an example of cross-function reentrancy because it's not the same function being reentered, it's another one. You can actually see two functions that repeat themselves. And we will not go into the details of it, but the attacker was able to inflate the amount of reward that was being able to withdraw thanks to this reentrancy. Go to the next. So how do we protect from this? We talked about mutexes and data synchronization strategies as a general level, but how do we do that in blockchain? We have two canonical strategies. There might be even others. But again, we have mutexes and a famous pattern. Let's go with the first one. That is called the checks effects interaction pattern, which is a coding pattern that tries to minimize the impact of such issues by ensuring that there is a consistent state whenever you do an external call. Going step by step, the checks are, for example, this require statement checks your input and the data that you're going to use. In this case, we require the user balance to be greater than 0, otherwise there is nothing to withdraw. Then we go with the effects on the state, and concretely, we move the set to 0 of the user balance to be before the external call, and then we do the interactions, which is the last part of such pattern, which is the external call. Obviously, this way, if we try to re-enter within the same function, using the same example as before, we will find the user balance set to 0, so we will not be able to recursively call the function that transfers it to the message sender. And the other way is just using mutexes. Some of you might already know it. There are modifiers. Modifiers are pieces of code that are executed even before the function body. And in this case, what we do is to use a variable to signal that we enter it into the function execution. Thanks to these special characters, then we leave the execution to the function body. And at the end, whenever the function body is done, we set that variable to false. Even here, if we try to re-enter it within the same function, we will leave this require statement, and the transaction will revert. So we effectively protect from that. But again, historically, the focus has been put on functions that write into storage. So the idea was to put this modifier whenever there was a function that was able to be re-entered, and usually we protect from those using those modifiers. But the focus lately has switched on read-only reentrancy. So we noticed that actually we need to put those modifiers even on read-only function, and not only the one that writes into storage. Just because, as we said at the beginning in the definition of reentrancy, it's not about writing into storage, it's having a consistent state, whether you are reading from it or writing into it. So we should put focus also in the read-only part. So it's an old issue, still impactful nowadays. We have strategies on how to protect from that. Why we are still failing, why we are still being impacted by such vulnerabilities. There are four important points first, but let's focus on the first trait. First of all is composability. 5 years ago, protocols were way easier than what are now. Now you have protocols that read from price oracles, have a default oracle if the principal one fails, that put money on the lending protocol or swap tokens into an automated market maker, all at the same time. You have many moving pieces. You integrate with protocols that has a code that you don't know because you didn't build. It's an external protocol. So it becomes really complex to trace down all the possible flows where a reentrancy can occur. And someone might argue that we have tooling, which is true. We have, fortunately, tooling that is able to detect many reentrancy patterns. But there's an intrinsic problem with tooling that is, tooling can detect what you instruct tooling to detect. So it falls behind the discovery of new variations of reentrancy. So we need to go through new variation and instruct tooling to update its knowledge and being able to detect all the possible variations. And then there are the typical example of developers actually failing in using mutexes or checks effects interaction patterns. But there's, again, the most important one probably is the fourth one, which is new variations are still being discovered. I talked about read-only reentrancy and cross-chain reentrancies. Read-only reentrancy, it has always been there, but apparently in the latest 1.5 years, 2 years, that probably show it off itself. We are not going into too many details of it. This is a little bit of an example of how read-only reentrancy usually work. It is not an example for all the possible use cases, but probably you can imagine it this way. You have a reentrant contract. A reentrant contract is just a contract that creates a reentrance possibility, meaning that it performs an external call while having an inconsistent state, for example. But in reality, you want to attack another contract. We will call it the target contract. And it happens that this target contract reads some storage from the reading contract. You can think of contracts reading balance of tokens or reading liquidities on other protocols. So the typical attack goes by creating a reentrancy opportunity, by triggering the reentrant contract, and then attacking the contract, which is going to read an inconsistent state from the contract that we just reentered. This is how usually a read-only reentrance work. Well, reentrance is not a bad thing. You should not think of reentrance as a bug or a severity issue. It is so if it comes together with an inconsistent state. An example of a good use of reentrancy is, for example, the fusion mode on 1inch. This is pretty curious. I didn't know about it before presenting this, but fusion mode is this product by 1inch where there are people creating limit orders, and the takers of those orders can partially fill those. And the way orders are filled, it's exactly through reentrancy. They partially fill through recursive calls, limit orders until they are fully filled. Again, that was just an example of how you can use reentrancy without it being a severity and doing it the proper way. And yeah, a little bit of references here, but you can find many more things on those. Let's move to the second category, which is, I call it not only Ethereum. And it is about many different chains that support Solidity contracts where you can actually deploy them. And the problems with those might be of a variety of reasons. One of the main one is, first of all, block time. There's this kind of assumption that, yes, there are 12 seconds per block in Ethereum. So you can actually do things like, if there are 12 seconds every each block, then there are 5 blocks in 1 minute, times 60 minutes, times 24, you will get 7,200 blocks. And you can say, okay, this is the number of blocks that happen in a day. So you can count time through it. And again, on Ethereum it might work. And you can even measure how much time has passed. So you have a starting block, you do block number minus starting block, assuming that blocks are increasing in number, obviously. And you multiply that by the block time. And this, again, might work on Ethereum, but if you deploy a contract that uses these patterns into another chain, first of all, the starting block might even not exist. Or it might point at a different moment in time from the one you expect it to be. And duration and upset time will be completely off because block time can be 2 seconds, 20 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever. So the message here is, if you're deploying contracts on blockchains which are not Ethereum, think about it. And if your contracts use such patterns, be aware of the fact that 12 seconds is something that is on the EVM. It might even change in the future, so be aware of that. Another important topic are oracles. The reason of why you can fail at oracles on other chains can be many. The most silly ones being the price feed you are looking for doesn't exist on another chain, or the address is a different one, or even decimals reported or the scale of the price reported by the oracle can be different. But probably the main thing to be aware of, especially on L2s, is that L2s work with something called a sequencer. And a sequencer has the ability to batch multiple transactions into a single one. And one important thing to check whenever you're dealing with an oracle is the timestamp at which the price has been updated the last time. If the sequencer does that job of batching multiple transactions, it might mess up with that timestamp. So you should be really aware of how the L2s are working, how transactions are being batched, and you should always check for that timestamp in your contract to check that the price is not stale and that you have a fresh, updated price. And fortunately, some oracles provider like Chainlink provide explicit documentation for L2s and instruction on how to deal with oracles there. Not all the oracle provider that does that, but whenever you're using oracles and you're implementing that on another chains, be sure to follow these suggestions, but also check if there are specific documentation by your oracle provider. Moving on. Another curious thing is, this comes from optimism. And it's the way in which we assume that opcodes or even precompiles behave the same between different chains. In concrete, we have the caller and origin opcode in the EVM, and you would expect that that works as it is on Optimism, but there's a little nuance, which is that if there is a message from L1 to L2, the transaction origin on L2 might be aliased with the message sender from L1. This is the official Optimism documentation. They even state that this is unlikely to make a significant difference. They didn't see any bug with it yet, but you should check on your contract that transaction origin and message sender behaves the way you expect to behave on any chain you're deploying your contracts. Going on with a little bit of examples of things that can go wrong on other chains. The first example is zkSync era. zkSync deployed a contract to sell some token and recollect it. They recollected that amount of it, which is a significant amount of money. And then they had a withdraw function that supposedly was able to take all the money out of the contract. But unfortunately, it was using the transfer function to transfer it. The transfer function is a special way of sending it on Ethereum, which is suggested to not be used, and the reason is it's limited in gas. It has a fixed amount of gas that it can consume. Otherwise, will revert. The reason of why not using that at all is because of this fixed amount that is creating an assumption on how it consumes, actually. And this might change or not in the future. But on ZK Syncera, the problem was that this chain has a completely different gas measuring mechanism from the EVM. Concretely, the transfer function on ZK Syncera always reverts because it consumes more than the fixed gas it has assigned and defined. So the result is funds are stuck. The team said that they found a way to transfer them out, which implied changing the way gas is measured. And I honestly didn't find any information whether this change has been applied yet or not. But yeah, this is just an example of things can go wrong on another chain. Moving on. Aave is a lending protocol that is deployed on several chains. They have their contracts deployed here and there. And at some point, they decided to implement a new interest rate strategy with a governance proposal, the 224. And this new interest strategy was having a new interface. Concretely, this function was having this set of variables. They voted on the proposal, they implemented, it was executed, the contract was updated on all chains. On Ethereum, it was working pretty well, but apparently on Polygon and Avalanche, some markets broke. And the reason was that for compatibility reason, that's what the team said, on Polygon, the interface was an old one. So they updated to a contract to another one and forgot to update the other contract that was pointing to it using the wrong interface. That's the wrong interface. Fortunately, for Aave, contracts are upgradable there, so 6 governance proposals later, they were able to actually fix the thing, even on Polygon and on Avalanche. The message here is that you should not assume at any moment that contracts are the same on every chain, and for little difference, which are the ones we are highlighting, they might be different actually. This might mean that interfaces are different and that your update doesn't apply to all the chains at the same time. Moving forward, this is a little bit unfortunate, and it's another example of things can go wrong on another chain. You know, probably Optimism did a huge airdrop with the OP token. At some point, they had to send 20 million worth of OP to a third party, and the third party provided the address of a multisig of Ethereum, but there was a miscommunication somewhere, and they sent those tokens to the multisig on Optimism. And obviously, on Optimism, that address was not a multisig. It was actually nothing. There was no code there. It was not either an account being used. The sad story of it is that the way multisigs are generated is through the use of create opcodes, but there is no user input. So an attacker took advantage of this address lying with those tokens on Optimism and created a replay attack on the multisig factory and created 67 multisigs until finally it reached out the same address and created a multisig there and was able to take all the money out. So the message here is don't expect addresses to be the same on other chains. What is a contract on a chain can be completely something else on another chain. Always check the address of which chain contains what. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. There are many things that can go wrong at any moment. And again, probably 2-3 years ago, we were not talking about these possibilities, but now that we have many, many chains, it is. And we should probably raise awareness on these subtle differences, things to be aware of when deploying contracts on other chain. Let's go with the latest category. I would admit that NFT attack vectors are 90% phishing attacks, malicious signatures, marketplaces being exploited. And it was hard to find some examples related to actual smart contracts problems. But here you have a little bit of an overview of all the possible attack vectors, including the ones related to social engineering attacks. We have a source and database there. But let's focus just on 3 examples that might be worth exploring a little bit when dealing with vulnerabilities related to smart contract example. Probably one of the well-known happened lately is the Omni protocol. Omni is a lending protocol that lets you deposit NFTs and borrow money using them as collateral. The team said that the funds lost were test money, even if they were real money, and no user funds are lost. So apparently those were their money. But I want to bring this example because it goes about reentrancy again. Specifically, you know that NFTs probably as the ERC-721 contract has something called on ERC-721 received, which is a NUC called whenever you are transferring the NFT to someone. And it's like a security measure to be sure that the recipient, if it is a contract, is able to move those NFT out. So otherwise, if you send NFT to a contract and the contract doesn't have a way to move them, those will be stuck forever. So it was born in a way to protect from transferring NFT and not having them stuck somewhere. But it's an external call to the recipient again. And this might create reentrancy opportunities if you couple that with an inconsistent state. And this is exactly what happened here. Going briefly to what happened is that the user provided some NFTs, borrowed some money, tried to withdraw those NFT, and it created a scenario in which his position now was unhealthy and had to be liquidated because without those NFTs, the collateral for those borrowed money was not enough, and the liquidator was the attacker itself that was given the opportunity to buy the latest NFT at a discount. And the problem with the inconsistent state is that during the liquidation, at the very end of the execution, the user that was having that position open is set to have a borrowing to false, meaning that once the liquidation happens, what the contract was doing is saying, okay, now we have liquidated this user, the user has no more borrows active, so it's all good. The problem is that during the liquidation, there was de-reentrancy, so the attacker was able to supply and borrow again, and then wait for the liquidation to finish, set himself as not being active in any borrow at all, and then finally withdraw all the NFTs. This is possible because at this stage, allowed to do so. The problem was with the reentrancy before that. So the solution here was to actually set this before the external call. Again, this is a canonical example. It happened recently. We all know how these things go, but it's difficult to track them down when you have many, many pieces. Another example, these latest 2 examples are from contests, so it's not real money involved, but they were curious vulnerabilities that I want to bring here. This goes about ERC-721 approvals. On ERC-721, you can approve single NFT to be spended by a spender, and you can even approve an operator on your account to operate with all your NFTs on their entirety. Futum is a protocol where you have your team, which is an NFT, you have your players, which are NFT within your team, and you can trade them and do many things. They have an escrow contract, and the escrow contract was responsible for holding your NFTs, and through some special function we're able to let you move them around. Indeed, the operator of that escrow was the owner of specific NFTs. The problem is that whenever you transfer an NFT, if you use a standard library, like the OpenZeppelin one, approvals are reset upon transfer. So if I send my NFT to someone else, all the approvals that I've sent to the NFT will be reset so that the recipient will not be triggered by my previously set approvals. The problem of using an escrow is that you need to remember to reset escrow approvals too. And they were exactly forgetting about that. Basically, the summary of this vulnerability is that I have an NFT, I put that into an escrow, I sell them, but nobody knew that I first approved the escrow to myself as an operator, and I was able then to take them back again and go away with the money and the NFT. Moving on the last one, we don't need to know what isomorph does. We will just focus on this function. And if you look at this function, you say, okay, there's a function called withdraw something. It's public, anyone can call it. And there's a transfer to the message sender of some tokens at the end, right? So all seems good. There is also a burn of an NFT. So we need to burn an NFT to actually receive those money. The burn function is an external call, so we need to approve the contract first to be able to burn the NFT we provide, right? So we need to send a transaction first to approve the contract, and then call this function in order to burn. So we need to do two transactions, right? But there's an issue here, which is that, and it's a silly one. If I send a transaction to the blockchain to approve this contract to burn my NFT, there might be someone spying on it and say, okay, this guy just approved the contract to burn his NFT. So whenever I try to then call this function to transfer to myself this amount of tokens, that person spying on me might front run me and burning my NFT, but going away with those money instead of me. The problem here is that at any moment, the contract is checking who's the owner of this NFT during the execution. The real issue is that it misses a lack or check of ownership before even burning or doing anything else. This again was a contest, fortunately. There was no real money involved, no user funds lost. But in general, we have been through reentrancies on NFTs, approvals, and ownership checks. And I think that pretty much resemble the entirety of the smart contracts related attacks on NFT, which are just not phishing attacks. Again, a little bit of references. And that's it, basically. Thank you very much. Some of you have some questions? Oh, good.
Not a question, but don't you think that CK Sync should have somehow forbid transfer to the compiler, since they are used as the compiler, if they didn't allow, because of their usage of gas, the kind of transfer?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is something that they might even call if they were testing on ZK-Sync, their contracts. But I'm not 100% sure of it, but the majority of the tests are still performed on local environments where the EVM is the Ethereum one. There's no perfect tool yet to test your contracts on all possible EVMs with their differences. and probably we should focus a little bit on it. And another thing is that zkSync has a page on their documentation which is called Differences with Ethereum, where they list
Some of them are covered for sure, because I suffered that.
They added this after they discovered it. That's the thing. So it's a documentation which is a constant work in progress. So yeah, in that case, the recommendation is test your contracts on the destination chains.
Yeah, listen adjustment.
Exactly.
Of course, that's their fault because of not testing,
Yes.
but also zkSync fault because of not documenting properly and even having a different compiler not issuing a warning or even providing that kind of function.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's pretty, I don't know if it's pretty clear from their website, but at least from the recommendation, they leave it pretty clear, which is prototype. And
yeah.
you should not treat it like a definitive production. Yes. Yeah. Yes. All right. Thank you.